Despite recounts, failed lawsuits, and Congress officially confirming President-elect Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 presidential election, a new NPR poll shows that 3 out of 4 Republicans do not accept that President Trump lost the election. Some GOP lawmakers are calling on the president to resign because his rally turned into a riot. Others are being asked to resign because they attended that same rally. With just a few days left in President Trump's term, the fate of devout Trump supporters' political allegiance is uncertain. And according to The Atlantic, so is the future of Trumpism, a defining force within the GOP. So with no president to boost their base, can Trumpism maintain its momentum? I want to bring in the author of that article, Derek Thompson. He's a staff writer for The Atlantic. Derek, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. You write about the deep story created by UC Berkeley sociologist Arlie Russell Hochschild. Can you explain what the deep story is and why you call it the Rosetta Stone for the rise of Donald Trump?
So Hochschild wrote this ingenious description of the modern Republican Party in 2015, just as Trump was arriving on the scene. And she said that to really understand the grievance that the Republicans that I know experience, you have to imagine their lives as a kind of line that leads up a hill toward the American dream, which is this promise existing over the crest of the hill. And this group that is disproportionately white and male and not college educated and rural feels like they're being cut in line by people who they thought should be behind them, by minorities, by immigrants. And they think, well, if the line is falling apart, we need to do something about it. We need to install someone who will reorder the shape of this line as we understand it. And that person was Donald Trump. He arrives on the scene, he embodies the ethic of this line, and he says, I am going to fight for you. And I have felt the psychology of this broken line myself. I hate these liberal elites who have mocked me in the press and have stood in my way in Manhattan. I feel the same grievance toward them that you do, and I'm going to fight for you. And that's really how this movement got started, is Trump essentially embodying the psychology of this broken line and promising to be the bodyguard of restoring the line as it should be.
That's very interesting. There's some political scientists that say there's no more potent political power than people who feel they are slipping, that their place in society is falling. And before the election, I spoke with Harvard government professor Michael Sandel, who said that for him, the greatest source of President Trump's political appeal was his ability to tap into the politics of resentment. You take that even further, and you talk about how there's an almost, President Trump is speaking to some of his supporters on an almost religious frequency, where this idea of, I am suffering for you or I am suffering with you is something that they relate to on a level that you point out in your piece that, some of the coastal elites can't quite understand. We're not listening on the same frequency. Is that right?
Yeah, well, as I suppose one of these coastal elites, I'll do my best to sort of surrogate this argument as it's explained to me. But basically, the idea is that you have the president spending all of his time in office talking about, I don't like what this person said about me on Twitter. I don't like what just happened to me on television. I don't like the way the CNN White House correspondent just behaved on this channel I happened to catch as I was watching in my bedroom. And you have, coastal elites like me essentially saying, what is this guy talking about? He's not being president. He's essentially the complainer in chief. And Hochschild told me, yes, he is the complainer in chief. And that is a part of what people love about him, because he embodies the suffering that they feel. He is constantly complaining about and hating on the very people that they want to complain about and whom they hate. And so once again, he embodies the suffering that a lot of these people who want their leader to be a surrogate of resentment, he embodies what they want to feel. And so whereas we see him being derelict in his presidential duties, a lot of his followers see him as perfectly representing the deep story of their resentment and their grievance and their feel of, as you said, slipping in the once orderly line of American society.
And, we've also seen the religious iconography out there that, that places him as a sort of Jesus Christ figure. And again, that's another figure that has suffered for his followers, right? So how does all of that then, though, add up to the way these conspiracy theories have factored into, what President Trump supporters believe in and act on?
Well, I think what you see with QAnon and these other conspiracies like Stop the Steal is this insistence that Trump, who has a godlike reverence for his own capacities, has invited people to sort of fill his identity with their hope for a Christ-like figure to lead their movement. And, spoiler alert, with the New Testament, Christ dies but is resurrected. He is not defeated. He is triumphant. And so there was this expectation that someone embodying that position within the Trumpist movement couldn't possibly fail himself. And he invited people to see any failure in his efforts, like his obvious loss in the November election, as rather a conspiracy against him. So I think Trump has really ingeniously played with a lot of these tropes, these religious tropes, these tropes of almost Nietzschean resentment, these tropes of grievance and suffering. And he has found a way to create a sort of an orbit, a constellation of support around his central star, where people cannot possibly believe that this man can fail, that he can only be failed by these, snakes and other people in government that are trying to defeat him. And so he brilliantly, in a way, marshaled these people's desperation to a point where you ultimately saw them, at the end of his term, trying to break into the Capitol and cause havoc at the very last moment of his official presidency. I do think that this deep story that begins with the broken line ended with the broken windows of the Capitol.
But the story may not be over because, as you pointed out, if we take this sort of religious narrative to its conclusion, there's a resurrection, right? So where do a lot of his, hardcore believers, think this is all going? Let's say the president leaves office very peacefully on January 20th, and let's say he doesn't run for president again. Will his ideas and images, survive within the Republican Party? Will that be enough to sort of put this to rest? Or do you think he has started, a movement that will eventually become bigger than him? Because right now it is pretty much all about him.
Yeah, you really do see the Republican Party right now somewhat captured by the monster they helped to co-create. They are suffering from audience capture. As you said, 3 out of 4 Republicans believe that Trump is the rightful president, or even supported what they saw at the Capitol last week. It's very difficult, I think, and I'm not excusing Republicans' behavior here, I'm just trying to rationalize it. I think they feel like it's difficult to stand up against this president who's way more popular than they are within their own electorate bloc. So I think that's really the issue here, is that Trump has created a constellation of supporters who don't believe that he can be failed. And therefore, any Republicans who stand out and say, you need to cut this out, end up inevitably being attacked by Republicans. You saw what happened with Mitt Romney on that plane ride that he took last week, where he's being attacked by people on the plane. So, I think this is a really, really difficult problem to solve within politics, short of courage, and we don't see a lot of that in politics. I think it's interesting, though, that you do see that even as the president might escape censure in Washington, he is being censured by Facebook and Twitter and Amazon and Apple and Twitch and Reddit, and the PGA canceled its relationships with his golf courses. He is suffering a kind of private sector impeachment that we really haven't seen before. That the president's behavior and the behavior of his supporters has been seen as so inexcusable that you are seeing corporate America have to provide the political punishment that the political system will not deliver to him.
Is there a danger, though, that this would drive his supporters even further underground, radicalize them even further, as this becomes a sort of even more of a David and Goliath situation, and us against them? Does this feed into their narrative?
It might be my own failure of imagination that I can't really think of how much more deluded you could possibly be than trying to break into the Capitol and assault a police officer because you believe that Joe Biden is being influenced by Hugo Chavez or something. I mean, my own capacity of imagination doesn't get far beyond that. But I do think that you bring up a really interesting point, which is essentially, if I could sort of reconceptualize it, is what happens when there are three internets? What happens when there are, for all meaningful purposes in politics, a left of center or centrist internet that is, inclusive of Facebook and Twitter, a conservative internet that exists in terms of the way that Republicans follow each other on Fox News and Fox News, Facebook pages, and then there is sort of a Trumpist internet that feels like it is shut out of those social media sites, but exists on something else like Gab potentially. I think it's rather disastrous in terms of Americans having a sort of shared reality for us to fracture in this way in terms of our media environment. You can't have a shared reality when you essentially have an entertainment-based competition for who can tell the best pro-Trump story. And that, I think, is where we are right now in terms of OANN and Newsmax and these pro-Trump media institutions that clearly exist, given with their own level of audience capture, trying to serve up exactly those kind of pro-Trump stories that they believe they are expected to give. These are not representations of truth. These are entertainment designed to make sure that Republicans can always sort of enjoy the chicken soup of their own confirmation bias. They can never be shown to be wrong, even when their fantasies are escalating into thinking that the president actually won an election that he clearly lost by millions and millions of votes.
Derek Thompson, thank you so much for joining us. Fascinating deep dive into the psychology of Trumpism. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.